That's pretty much.
Good morning. I'm Brian Nelson, Vice President of Institutional Advancement at Dunwoody College of Technology. Welcome to our LEAD Speaker Series. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to remind you that all attendees are in the listen and view only mode, which means you will not be able to activate your webcam or microphone. You may use the chat feature to post questions for the Q&A session after the presentation. It's my great pleasure this morning to welcome and introduce Kim Randolph. Kim is the Vice President, Energy Supply, Engineering and Construction for Xcel Energy. She holds an MBA from the McComb School of Business at the University of Texas and a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Houston. Kim is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Texas and a certified project management professional. She serves on Dunwoody's Board of Trustees and is chair of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. And Kim is also a delight to work with. Kim is originally from Houston and has adopted Minnesota as her new home. She lives in Minneapolis with her husband and 2 children. Kim will be giving a presentation on attracting, retaining, and growing the pipeline of women in engineering, a personal perspective of women entering and succeeding in the engineering field. As a special note, I want to let you know that Dunwoody has a Society of Women Engineers student group. If you're interested in more information, please contact co-president Stephanie Hampton or Dunwoody Student Affairs Office. I'm very pleased this morning to welcome Kim Randolph, so let's give her a very warm welcome to Kim. Thanks, Kim.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Kim Randolph. Thanks so much for joining me. Today I'll talk about women in engineering. You know, I'm always excited and I will always sign up to spread the word about engineering. It is a great career for those interested in STEM for all genders and all cultures alike. So thank you, Dunwoody, for the invitation. You know, engineering is the doorway to invention and innovation. The opportunities are vast, whether working in power generation on clean technologies as I do, or if you're working in high tech on the next iPhone. There are many great careers to be had. So if you're here as a business leader that recognizes the value of diversity on your teams, and you want to learn more about the state of women in engineering, and you want some ideas to move the needle, great to have you here. Or if you're a woman in engineering, you're looking to hear a voice that is similar to your own, and you are also passionate about our stories, it's great to see you here too. Whatever brought you here, it's all good news to me because you probably already recognize that there are gender and diversity gaps in engineering, and you want to do your part in making sustainable change. You see the value proposition of what a diverse team brings to a company's performance. You understand it's competitive out there and the status quo may no longer support your bottom line. You need innovation. Or, you know, just perhaps you have a daughter, a granddaughter, a mentee that you want to pave the way such that she is truly able to be anything she wants to be. No barriers, no bias, no glass ceilings. You know, you realize that a diverse workforce is a better climate for everyone, not just your females, not just your employees of color, but everyone. Studies show that their experience will be a more harmonious and collaborative atmosphere where everyone can be their best and have increased job satisfaction. So as I talk about the state of women engineering, I will focus in on those gaps. I'll share some stories, and I'll provide you with some ideas and some actions that you can do as an employer, as a leader, or as a fellow colleague to help build a more robust pipeline of diverse engineers. So let's jump in. Okay, I'm an engineer and I'm really into data because data drives information, information drives action, and action drives change. So the data I'll show you we'll focus in on that gap, particularly around attainment and retention of women in engineering. You know, I'll refer to some great research that's out there. this information is readily available, but there's some interesting stuff going on with McKinsey and SWE, that's Society of Women Engineers. Tons of stuff out there. Many of your companies have been digesting this for years, but I will say when it comes to these gaps, since a lot of it is not new information, but now feels different. The time for meaningful change, for like step change and outcomes for diversity, it's here. I don't know, perhaps it's the social unrest of 2020 that has shined the light on inequities around education, employment, and achievement. Or perhaps it's that the data sets are stronger. Research has grown into this large data set with participation from hundreds of companies with years of data. So we're starting to see substantiated trends of what a diverse workforce brings, and the results are compelling. Whatever the driver, now feels different. Most of our companies already have D&I initiatives. It's been on radar for years. Most companies are doing the right thing and they're very sincere in their efforts, but now feels different. We got to get moving. There's a restlessness in the pace of improvement, urgency, if you will, to see real change. Your communities want it, your customers want it, your employees want it. More and more, you'll find that your shareholders want it too. So these baby steps that we've accomplished thus far with women in engineering, quite frankly, it just isn't enough, because at this rate, women will never catch up in representation, or at least it won't happen in our lifetime and maybe not in our kids' lifetime. So this is why I think, as I talk today, weaving in some personal experiences will give context to all these numbers, some personal experiences of being a woman in engineering. Now, some stories I tell you today will be from the earlier part of my career and some of my colleagues' careers I'll share with you, because I feel that that's a particularly vulnerable stage, mostly from a risk of getting left behind or maybe disillusioned. And so I took those stories and kind of derived my thoughts on what approaches would be effective to help you as you decide what you want to do going forward. But take my personal experience or experiences that I share as one data point. So stories are unique to an individual and it's not representative of the whole, but it does provide clues. Perhaps there are some nuggets or takeaways that will provide context for what roadblocks could look like, but also what good support looks like. And it's not all bad news. Hey, I've had a great, fun time in my career. I'm still having fun in my career. It's challenging, exciting, and crazy, and all in a good way. So take feedback you hear today as that one data point, but I want you to go out and seek hundreds of these data points. And along with that great research that I talked about, turn all that data into information to inform your decisions about where you want to be with your company in terms of D&I. So I will say, in preparation for this talk, I did a little personal research of my own. I interviewed a few of my close engineering friends. I have a close-knit group of 5 friends. We're all female engineers, and we're all Black. We met 20 years ago, the oldest of the engagements, at a networking event, and we've stuck together ever since. And so as long as I've known these incredible women, I really didn't know all their personal stories. I mean, we talk every week, every Saturday, Zoom call. We chat about our kids, our jobs, our husbands. We talk about politics. But I didn't really know their early stories about why they became an engineer and what it was like. And even for one of us, why they left the field altogether. So I interviewed them to hear their stories and get their recommendations on what to communicate here too. And it was eye-opening because I learned that our journeys were unique. We went to different colleges, came from different cities, 2 came from different countries. Some of us stumbled into engineering because someone impactful in our lives pointed us that way. Others knew we were going to be engineers all our lives. But the common denominator in all of these stories is that the first half of our careers, there were some times when obstacles prevented us from being our best, or there perhaps lacked systems to help us be our best, but we had to push through nonetheless. But despite these common obstacles we shared, We all had stories, every one of us, a pivotal point in our careers or points where someone who didn't look like us changed our lives forever. Someone that recognized the potential in us, challenged us, helped us to get ready for the next open door, or they actually opened that door, which changed the trajectory of our careers. So I say all of that because there are great people out there like you. And even if you don't have any formalized systems or programs in your company, you have the power to transform a life. All right, let me get to one of these stories. All right, let's talk about the reluctant mentor. So it's a funny story. It's about one of my friends. Her name is Linda. I'm going to call her Linda as an alias. It's about a guy who reluctantly changed her life for the better. She said she was a young engineer working in oil and gas in the late 80s in the South. It's a tough time and place to be a female engineer. So let's call this guy Jim. Jim was a seasoned professional and he was top in his field. Let's just say Jim was not progressive in his view of women and minorities. And I'm really being nice here. He was very vocal about his views, and it wasn't a secret to anybody, and he was unapologetic. But he was a star in his company. He got stuff done. He was very successful. And back in those days, if your results were good, a level of tolerance of a blind eye was turned to some of the not so good things. But Lisa knew she could learn a lot from this guy, especially about the business. She knew he possessed knowledge that she wanted. And if you knew Lisa, she's extremely driven. She wanted to learn from him, and she was also, first off, she wanted to learn from him. But she was also going to show him that his views about the capacity of women, and especially a Black woman, to be successful in oil and gas were wrong. At the same time, she was going to get exactly what she wants from him in terms of information. You can probably tell she's a firecracker. Anyway, long story short, she ultimately got this guy to begrudgingly agree to mentor her. She calls it mentoring. He probably wouldn't have even called it that. He only agreed to do it if she didn't tell anybody. She had to keep it a secret. I mean, come on, he had a reputation to protect. Because he was going to prove her wrong, that she lacked the capacity to be successful. And this arrangement went on for some time, and I can't imagine how she got through it, but she learned so much and got exactly what she needed. You know, he ultimately admitted to her that she was the best mentee he ever had. She listened, she put in the work. He began to see her potential, not just her gender and her color, but this still all remained a secret. No one at the company never knew, not even his admin. These meetings were off the books. So several years later, when he retired, she learned about it. She didn't even know he retired. She didn't even get an invitation to the party. He literally took their secret to the grave. I love how Linda handled this situation. I, at that point in my career, probably wouldn't have been so bold. Again, we're all unique. You know, I'm of the Generation X group, which comes right after baby boomers. So I'm really close to the cutoff, though, between baby boomers and Gen X. And my parents, at least one of them, was much, much older when they had me. So the age difference between the youngest, which was me, or next to youngest, and the oldest is 20 years. My dad was in his 20s during the Great Depression. So I was raised with some of the attributes you find in baby boomers. When I was coming up, I was told, look, life is hard, life is not fair. You can be anything you want to be, but the world doesn't owe you anything. So you work hard, you brush off the negativity, keep your head down and keep it going. And that message was a good thing for me and a not so good thing for me in some cases. The good thing is that I learned to push past those that didn't like me without merit. It actually inspired me to work harder because I was going to show them what my friend did. But on the flip side, that mentality made it hard for me in my early career. I was taught to be quiet, kind of keep your troubles to yourself, just keep working hard. So if I ran into an uncomfortable situation at work, I didn't speak up. I kept quiet. And then I just turned those negative feelings and experiences into drive and ambition, and especially hard work. I felt, you may not like me for how I look, but I'm going to show you. So it took me years in my early career to really deprogram that out of me. And that's very much not my life now. I'm very disciplined about speaking up for myself, disciplined about having a voice. I'm disciplined about speaking up for others. And I'm intolerant of harassment, intimidation, and being an advocate for others. So yeah. Now feels different. Let's get to the data. So women continue to be the most underrepresented demographics in engineering. We're only at 13.6%. Women and young girls fail to see themselves reflected in the images and media surrounding STEM careers. We need to dismiss the society-generated notion that some activities are better suited for one gender over another, because it's never too early to nurture an interest in technical fields. On the right side of the screen, you'll also see there are gaps in leadership in engineering. Of the 237 engineers, 91% of those positions of leadership, they're men. Only 9% are women. Also want to look at the pipeline. So women graduating in engineering today, 10 years ago, women graduating in engineering with BS degrees was around 18%, 10 years ago. Now it's 20%. It only grew by 2% in 10 years. It's very slow growth, if you want to call it growth at all. But what's really interesting and troubling at the same time is that even when they're in college, a third of the women that signed up for STEM degrees, they switch majors, 30%. Now, we have kids in college switching majors. It's not an uncommon thing as a freshman, but 32% is an indicator it's something is out of whack. And overall, there's been a significant increase in the award of engineering degrees, overall, 40%. But women are still stagnating at 20% of graduates. And for women of color, it's only 6%. And then fast forward 20 years later in their careers. So if you go back and check in with the women that did graduate in engineering 20 years later, 30% left the field. They went on to different careers. So one of my 5 friends I told you about, she's a part of that 30% that left. Let me tell you a little bit about her story. So this is a very touching conversation I had with her. Let's call her Marley. She opted out of the rat race. She told me that on her first day on the job, the hiring manager was showing her around the office and stopping by different cubicles and introducing her. And a couple of times he made a joke. He said that he was going to get a big bonus because he hired a female and a black female at that. Ha, ha, ha. He thought it was funny. Marley did not. He saw what was on the outside, not who she was on the inside. And look, she had a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in engineering. This was her second big job in the industry. She had great experience. She was only a few years younger than a hiring manager. But she tried to brush off a comment. She called her dad, she told me, and told him what happened. And he said, you just have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. And that's just how the world is sometimes. So, she worked hard. She was a top performer during her time there. And she said during that time, she was walking down the hall one day, and a much older gentleman, he stopped her in the hall, and he said kindly, he looked her up and down and says, you look like you should work in communications or something. She thinks he meant it as a compliment, that she dressed nice or she had a nice presence. But what she heard is that you don't fit in here. Marley is really petite. She's only at 4'11". She's really tiny. She's always been very subconscious about her height. And she felt she was a target for being picked on because people misinterpreted her size for her power. But someone was judging her again on what was outside and not inside. And so it went. She worked hard, had a consistent track record in her performance assessments every year. But the recognition and advancement never came. And when she really demanded and got some real feedback about what was holding her back, her young manager said, well, you're more tactical than you're strategic. And so she read that as, I don't see potential for you. And I don't even have constructive feedback to help you get there. Marley says it wasn't delivered in a mean-spirited way. And in hindsight, she thinks her young manager was likely doing the best he could with what he knew. He just lacked training to have these conversations around development and probably didn't know anything about unconscious bias. So she felt that feedback was more about lowering her expectations rather than building her up in her current role and preparing her for future roles. She was discouraged, ready for a change. She left that company and she left engineering altogether. Fortunately, she's savvy, she's a great businesswoman with great talents, and that translated into a different industry. And also, this new industry she found was a better fit and culture for her. And another perk, there was a great work-life balance for her as a mother. But I asked Marley a tough question at the end of this conversation. I hoped I didn't cross the line. I said, do you miss it? Do you miss engineering? And she looked thoughtfully and she said, yeah. She's always loved engineering, and that will always be a part of who she is. So wow, the industry, the energy industry, the engineering field lost a good one. So studies show that those who do leave, that 30% who do leave, they cited organizational climate as the number one reason. So, okay, let's look at the pipeline, the corporate pipeline by gender and race. Now, it's another view of what I call the leaky talent pipeline. Now, this shows the demographic for all professional jobs. This is not just engineering. So this shows all the corporate pipeline. This was produced by McKinsey and Lead.Org, and it's in their Women in the Workplace 2020 publication. Go get it. Let me say it's great. If you look from left to right, that pipeline gets smaller. So from left, it shows different career stages from entry level, then it jumps to manager, then it jumps to senior manager, director, then to VP, EVP, and C-suite. The gray at the top section is men, broken down by white men and men of color. The bottom, orange, is women and women of color. This is useful information. A lot of stuff is happening here, but let me just give you 3 takeaways. First, entering the pipeline from the left, the positions are split 50-50, roughly. 53% men, 47% women. But as you travel one step to the right from entry level into manager, you see a significant change in the ratio. Women drop from 47% to 38%. And then the drop continues at every subsequent step all the way to the C-suite. But that most significant drop is at the first rung in the ladder. So what this means is that even as hiring and promotion rates improve for women at senior levels, women as a whole can never catch up here, simply because there's too few women in the pipeline to advance. So in McKinsey's report, they say that that first broken rung has a long-term impact on the entire pipeline. And since men significantly outnumber women at the manager level, there are far fewer women to hire or promote to senior managers. So by the time you get all the way to the right, to the C-suite, the percentages are totally out of sync. They're now 78% men in the C-suite and only 22% for women. Now, this pipeline is just a corporate view. So this is many different professions and companies. I think at least 600 companies participated in this story. And the entry level is 50-50. Now imagine what this looks like for engineering when the entry level is 80-20. And then you overlay the systematic erosion and that broken rung, we see the problem in engineering is really compelling. So why do we do something about it? How do we do something about it? Bottom line, why we do something about it is because we should live true to our values, whether it be personal and corporate. Why? Because we want to leave the world in a better place than we found it. We want the next generation to be well prepared and well positioned to be successful. We want our girls and our boys to be all they can be. Why? We do something because our communities, customers, and now investors will demand it more and more. But there is a financial incentive here. There's ample evidence that diverse and inclusive companies are likely to make better, bolder decisions. Diverse teams have been shown to be more likely to radically innovate. Studies show that those companies in the top quartile for diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above average. And that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on executive teams were 25% more likely to have profitability above average. We found that higher the representation, higher the likelihood of outperformance. Basically, this is saying a diverse organization is an innovative organization. And an innovative organization can be a profitable organization. The numbers don't lie. All right, so let's talk about what we can do about it. So these are my recommendations, blending in all of my experiences and some of the stories that I've told you from my close friend group. Number one, elevate your recruitment strategies. You need diverse candidate panels to feed that pipeline. If you're not finding the candidate pool that you need, you're not seeing the diverse candidates that you need, then you need to expand your reach because the pool is out there. Now, most companies have established relationships with universities and colleges, that have provided really reliable pipeline of entry engineers. And that's okay. Those relationships are valuable, particularly in the communities that you serve. But think about expanding your net. Expand your reach to also include schools that can help you fill gaps, create new partners, expand to those schools with higher levels of representation of female and students of color, or expand to those schools that are actively working to represent the communities that they serve, like a Dunwoody. And check out minority serving institutions as they continue to play an important role in educating students of color in engineering. Because these minority and female graduates are out there. They are looking for jobs. They're just waiting on you to show up. Number two, provide equity through opportunity. You can do this through fairness and transparency in opportunities, promotion, pay, recruitment, and equal access to those opportunities, resources, and retention support. But first, make a good assessment of where you are as a company today. Evaluate all rungs of the ladder, that is, by demographics. Do you have any broken rungs? Find where you are vulnerable. And by understanding where you are, then you can have an honest conversation amongst your leadership about whether or not that is where you want to be as a company. Does your company represent the community that it serves? Can it do better? Find the barriers and fix it. Understand why the rung is broken and why is the pipe leaky in the first place. What systematic policies, cultures, or just plain unawareness that is contributing. But use more than just the data. Also listen to your employees, get direct feedback. And when I say direct feedback, I mean talk directly to your female engineers. Small groups, safe spaces where they can share their stories and aspirations for change, share their experiences, but also use confidential and anonymous means. Have several different modes of communication. Surveys are great, so you get to hear all the voices, the extrovert and the introvert, but then make a serious commitment to making change and providing equity through opportunity, not baby steps. Let's make some jumps. Because if you're successful in providing equity through opportunities, your female engineers will be your biggest ambassadors. They will create the way for future female engineers to follow into your company. Next, tackle microaggressions and unconscious bias. Establish a culture where people treat each other with respect, where bias, bullying, discrimination, and microaggressions are not tolerated. And look, today, companies are pretty clear about harassment and microaggressions. Zero tolerance, bold and clear, no doubt. If you've been in the business long enough and compare the work environment in the 80s to today, we've come a long way. Companies take this stuff seriously, but that doesn't mean we've stamped it all out and does indeed lurk in dark corners. We'll have to remain diligent and persistent in keeping it at bay. And companies are actively improving awareness against unconscious bias. Having a commitment starts right at the top, declaring a commitment to a safe workplace. So training is important. So when you are taking your corporate mandated training on these topics, don't just click through because, well, that's not me, that's not who I am. But it's really bigger than that. It's also being knowledgeable such that you can identify, even if you are not on the giving or the receiving end, and you can take action. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. I'll share one of my personal experiences. I had a very uncomfortable situation early in my career. It was my first year as an engineer. I really hadn't developed my voice. And at my job, there was this guy who would say jokes about women, especially jokes about people of color, Black people, every time I walked into the break room. And I was one of just a couple of females in the group, and I was the youngest. but I was the only person of color. He would never make these jokes when the older women were in the room, by the way. So anyway, he would make a joke and then he'd pat me on the back and laugh and say, "Oh, Kim, I'm just kidding." So what was so confusing to me, because, he'd always been nice to me. We worked closely together. We were friends. But the jokes felt wrong and made me uncomfortable. And when he told these jokes, there were other people in the break room. Most of them didn't laugh. And, I would make eye contact with one or two of them, and I can tell they were having a reaction. But, I tried my best to ignore it, to be a good sport. But then it just got to be just too much. So I just began avoiding the break room, and I just started eating at my desk. Well, someone in that break room, a fellow employee, I don't know who it is to this day, got tired of it and spoke up for me. And so he or she reported it to leadership without me even knowing. And then one day the big boss calls him into the office and he says that, "Well, Kim, I've been hearing stories about some uncomfortable situations in the break room. Is there something you want to talk to me about?" Even still, I wouldn't say anything. I didn't want to rat him out. He was my friend, right? I was only one of the few females and people of color. Surely I didn't want to be the snitch. I didn't want to be retaliated against. Didn't want to be seen as a troublemaker. But my boss, he could sense my hesitation, so he said this. He said, "Look, Kim, sometimes people use jokes to show you who they really are. That is not your friend." And so I opened up. So to this day, like I said, I don't know who did it, but they were a voice for me when I couldn't find my own voice, and I'm happy they did. So be a voice for yourself, be a voice for others. Now, of course, I know my example is an extreme case, but there are more subtle situations out there that are probably more prevalent. Create an atmosphere where your engineer is not afraid to talk to someone they can trust if they do encounter microaggressions or purposeful bias. And the absolute worst thing you can do when she does come to you is to do nothing. That will erode away her spirit if you do so. So finally, on this point, you want a committed culture, not just a compliant culture. There's a difference. A compliant culture is where you just follow all the rules, and a violation of the rules results in penalties. And I know those are necessary for certain behaviors, but you also want a committed culture. That's where your employees do the right thing because it's just the right thing to do. Create that. And finally, promote openness and foster belonging. And this is encouraging your female engineers to contribute their diverse talents fully. Nurture that spark, encourage curiosity, encourage risk-taking. You should do this with all of your engineers, by the way, but let's be intentional about creating an environment where their ideas are sought, valued, and nurtured. Keep them engaged with interesting and challenging work. Continue to coax and stretch. Make it clear that they belong and have a future there. And if you don't know what that looks like, what belonging means, ask them. What does belonging mean to them? Finally, in this category in my career, I found that networking groups are great. Internal groups such as affinity groups or business resource groups, they're great tools to be connected. These groups are great for developing camaraderie within and across all demographics. But ensure these groups have executive sponsors, someone in leadership that is committed to supporting that group and is vested in its success. Showing up and listening and being a conduit for communication of important issues. Also, external networking is great too. You recall that group of women I told you about, right? Well, how we found each other. Well, it was an event held by the Women's Energy Network. It's a national organization, fantastic. They have chapters all over the U.S. I'm still active today. We were young engineers that showed up at this evening event. I think it was a wine tasting, and we found each other at the engineers table and we hit it off. I don't know what I'd do without them today. Lastly, provide role models, male, female. It's a great learning adventure for both parties. And you need mentors and sponsors. There is a difference between the two. Mentors help prepare you for the next open door. A sponsor opens that door. You need both. So, we've explored the gaps in engineering, gender. We see the need and perhaps we feel the urgency to make meaningful change. We know that it impacts the company's bottom line. We know that a diverse organization is an innovative organization. We explore the talent pipeline, the corporate ladder. We know to go look for those broken rungs. We talked about widening our reach and finding talent in new and different ways. I've shared ideas and focus areas as it relates to my personal experiences and my close network. But there's other things that you can do. Don't stop there. And I've shared those personal stories that I hope make it more tangible for you, more real about what a real journey can be like. And even though those personal stories, had some uncomfortable situations, those are outliers in my experience. Overwhelmingly, I have worked with great colleagues and special great leaders that took me under their wing, that saw my potential for what it is and not the package that it comes in. I've had some leaders that saw my potential before I even fully embraced it. And because of that, I've been able to have an exciting career, and I've had doors open that I know would not have otherwise. That is your power. So you know what? I must pay it forward now. I owe it to all those female engineers that will come after me to make their experience better. Because like I said before, now is different. Now is the time to move the needle, to advocate, to champion, to mentor, to sponsor. Now is different. So join me. Well, that wraps up my talk today. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed talking about it. I'll turn it back to Brian for Q&A.
Great. Kim, thank you. Really, your insights were amazing and tremendous and so helpful and appreciated. If we're getting some questions in, and we'll walk through those, and look forward to hearing your responses. We have a question. Are there questions we should ask to access if the organization is the right fit? What question should we be asking about the organization?
I think you need to look at their values statement. I think you need to start there. And I know you think, well, that's just, some pie in the sky thing. And it's not. Companies are very thoughtful in what they put into their value statement. I think you need to take a look at that place first to understand if what's underpinning those values, if that aligns with what's important to you. I think that's a good place to start. And I think you need to do a little bit more homework, that if you can find those that either work there or have experience with the company as a customer, that they can give you feedback on their experiences, right? Because experience is a great indicator of what's really going on at a company. And then two, I really wouldn't take one or two, like I talked earlier, one or two data points to really form an opinion. You got to keep an open mind to make sure that you're not missing something, right? Because two data points may lead you in the wrong direction. But those are some places I would start. Look at the value and vision statement, look at their brand, look at their reputation in the community, and see if you can find some internal folks or people closely tagged to that company to get some direct feedback.
Great, thank you. Kim, can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by sponsorship and how that affected you and how you would direct people to find sponsorship?
Yeah, so the sponsor is different than a mentor. So you may have a sponsor working on behalf of you right now and you don't even know it. So it's not like a formal position like a mentor. I'll give you an example of a sponsor I had for me. There was a woman in oil and gas. This is back when I worked for a different company, and I hadn't yet really entered into management, and she was extremely senior, very, very senior. She was probably one of the top 3 women in oil and gas at that time. She's since retired, but I was just in awe of her leadership style. I had the opportunity to present in front of her a few times because I was working on a high-profile project, and when she came into town, I got to be around her. And when she walked in the room, she just had this presence and this aura of intelligence and grace all mixed together. Because back in the day in oil and gas, was, the typical leader was, kind of rough and gruff and pound their fists on the desk. She was the absolute opposite of that and still was as powerful as any other of them. So I got up the courage to ask my business unit president if I could get 15 minutes with her. And I thought, there's no way, in an organization of 100,000 people that she is going to say yes. But she did. She did. She gave me 15 minutes. And so when I was talking to her, and I'm telling you this because I think she was a sponsor for me. I don't have any proof of this, but I'm going to just tell you what happened during that discussion and after. So she says, well, Kim, tell me what you want to do in your career. So then I had a line and said, well, I want to increase my influence. I want to do more for the company. I had this kind of line, apple pie, motherhood, all that other stuff. And she said, Kim, tell me what you really want. And then I kind of said the same thing again. I just changed the words around. She could tell I was being shy and reserved about what I wanted to be. And she said, you need to say what you want and you need to be clear about it. I said, well, you know what? I want to run this business unit one day. That's what I want to do. I just said it. And she said, there you go. That's what I want to hear. I want to know what you want to do. She said, because I already know what you can do, Kim. I've seen you in action and I've been hearing about you. But I wanted to hear you say it. I wanted to hear your voice, and don't you ever stop using your voice. That was a great experience. I never saw her again one-on-one. But I will say within the next year, I was promoted to vice president. And in my mind, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I think she was a sponsor for me. Or at least there was someone else in the leadership chain that had told her about me, right? That, hey, this is Kim, I see potential in her. So that's a sponsor. That's not a mentor. And so I really had to be brave. And remember, I described for you early in my career that I was, I didn't really have a voice. She helped me find my voice. So you go out and you find that person that you want to be your sponsor, and you make that happen.
That's great. Thank you. One of our guests complimented you and said you're such a breath of fresh air, and is wondering if you're a graduate of a speech and debate program along the way with your communication skills.
No, I just find that, one people that know me, I talk a lot. I love to talk, but I am so fired up about this. I really am, because, I think if my journey to become an engineer had been, just a breeze, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here today speaking with such passion about it. So thank you for that feedback. I always like to take opportunities to practice. So when folks come and say, hey, Kim, will you talk about this topic? Even if I'm afraid, even if I'm nervous, or even if I'm busy, I say yes. I'm exercising a muscle. But I tell you, it does make a world of difference if you love what you're talking about.
That's great. Kim, how can you engage women and men of color without making them feel like they are responsible for educating us?
Yeah, that's a great question. It totally is, because we, especially as especially as a person of color, I'm sometimes I think, why do they measure with my words? Because I don't want to mess it up for everybody, right? It's like, no one in the Black community elected me to be an ambassador. So I have to tell myself, but you know what, though, your voice still matters. It's just one data point. And that's why I was saying during my speech, collect several different data points, right? And don't be afraid to share your stories and to talk, because they want to hear your voice. They really do. And even though it's uncomfortable, it's really the only way to provide context to what all of those numbers say. Because your management team, they want to do better. These companies want to do better. You got to help them get there. And I think if we're silent and we just like, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing, I don't want to come across mad, and I don't want to come across this way, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. If they don't know you personally, then don't take it personally. Just be honest, just be transparent, and be patient. Be patient with those that you're talking to. walk them through and help them understand. And even just like my friend with that reluctant mentor, you know, she looked past all that. She didn't see him for his views. She saw him for what he could do for her. So look at this as what the company can do to make your work experience better, everybody's work experience better, not just people of color, not just women. Just look at that's going to be the final goal here. So don't hold back your voice. I think we've held back our voice for too long, and it's time that we help move the needle in an important way. So start having those conversations with your colleagues.
Great, thank you. And Kim, do you see that girls are enrolling in STEM programs at the same level as boys, or is there a disparity that you're seeing?
Yeah, there's still a disparage in the amount of women that are signing up for STEM careers. So there's not as many that are signing up, and then we're losing them in college that they change majors, and then even when they get into the workforce, they leave again. So this pipeline is leaky all over. And so, you know, I thought about putting this as one of my points, and I'll say that here, we have to reach into that pipeline earlier. We have to show examples of what engineering or engineering at your companies look like, because that's really when you spark interest and enthusiasm. And it's really around 12 and 13 years of age. I read an article once, and gosh, I wish I would remember what it was, but it was about how that's really the age where you need to take your kids to travel, to see different countries, to see exposure to different careers, because it imprints in a different way. And again, you know, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a sociologist. It was just an article I read, but I believe that. And so like when I was talking to some of my friends that, you know, that went into engineering, and they said they knew nothing about engineering. A couple of them knew nothing about engineering. I said, well, how did you become an engineer? By accident. They said they knew they liked science and technology, but the only way they got to engineering is because someone, an adult, a counselor, a teacher, a career fair of a company that came in and introduced what was possible with STEM. And that's how they went into engineering. So I think we need to get involved way earlier than we are. Typically we start around college, and there's some, like there's colleges like Dunwoody that starts earlier, right? And that's great. And I think that's a great model there. And I think as companies, we need to start earlier. I know in Xcel Energy, we do that. We have we partner with the Girl Scouts. So maybe that's where we need to ramp up, right? Start embedding that spark and that interest early, and they'll know that, I'm going to be an engineer. And I don't know if I'm going to be building the iPhone or inventing the next medical device or the next manufacturing process, automated manufacturing process or clean energy like I do. But they'll know that there is a career out there for them, and they'll develop some energy behind that.
Good deal. Kim, what advice do you have for a female who has felt timid and submissive in a male-dominated environment if she wants to break out of that shell?
Yeah, it's hard. It takes work. It is a muscle that you have to continually work at. And I think what I had to get in my mind, you know, I was always thinking about what that other person thinks about me, right? And it was always negative. It was always negative. So I think you need to remember, if someone treats you bad, remember it's something wrong with them, not you, because normal people don't go around destroying other people. They just don't. And so when I realized that and let that sink in, it was just so freeing, right? Also, too, I had one great leader in my career. This is early in my career. He was a COO at an oil and gas company. And he told me, he says, well, Kim, what you think other people think about you probably isn't right. And I totally rejected what he was saying. You know, so I sat there and nodded my head and walked out. I'm like, no, I know people, and I know that guy didn't like me. You know, I was in this meeting, he was a jerk, and he didn't like me. And, you know, now fast forward 20 years, I get that, because we really don't know what's going on with people and their lives and their mind. And we may not always run into people when they're at their best. So we need to give people a break. But most of all, we need to give ourselves a break. We are the least empathetic to ourselves than we are to anybody. We say things in our mind to ourselves. We talk worse to ourselves than we do about anybody else. We'll walk away from a meeting where we spoke up and we'll walk away and in our head, we're like, God, well, that was stupid. Why'd you say that? They hated that what you said. Oh man, you just ruined your chances. Think about that internal voice. And it is persistent and we gotta shut it down. Love yourself. Would you say the things that you say to yourself to anybody else? Think about that when that negative thought comes in your head, something that's eating at your confidence. Would you say that to somebody else, that was stupid what you just did, Kim? You just ruined it? Or would you say, yeah, you know what, Kim, that you probably didn't get your point across, but you did make some good points. And the next time you get in front of this group, we're going to make sure we land that idea. That's what you would tell somebody else. So why do we beat ourselves up? So work on that. Be conscious of that. Stop when you're in the middle of a feeling and dissect it and say, what am I feeling right now? I walked out of that meeting and I'm feeling a certain way. Well, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? And is that rational? And I think if we start to quiet that crazy naysayer in the back of our mind, we will open up our confidence little by little, and that we can keep that guy at bay. Now, that guy, this little, I don't know what you want to call it, this little negative voice. Now, there is some positive to it because it's like your fight or flight instinct. That little voice makes you prepared. So like in preparing for this speech, that little voice tells me, all right, Kim, you don't want to screw this up, right? You better do your homework. You better do your research. You better practice. You better get your thoughts together. So that voice does help us be prepared for avoiding the worst, right? But then it can get dysfunctional and start eating away at your confidence. So hopefully that helps. That was a lot.
That was great, Kim. Thank you for all your insights and your perspective, and can see why you're so successful in the work you do and such a role model for so many people. I want to thank you for being part of the presentation today. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions we have today, but we'll maybe you can take a chance and take a look at some of those and be able to respond to some of the inquiries that came in. But amazing work. Thank you for your time. Please, audience, join us next on December 3rd for Angie Wardell, who is the Executive Vice President of Operations and President of Oil and Natural Gas at Coreco. And another exciting presentation as part of the LEAD series. Thank you again, Kim, for your leadership and your support of Dunwoody, and everybody have a great day.